it's not communication, it's not advertising, it's much bigger than that. So if you get thrown away by advertising that you see in the streets and stuff, that's not necessarily what marketing is.
My name's Peter Sumpton, and this is the Marketing Study Lab podcast. A podcast for those that are thinking, have thought and are doing, or already have a marketing qualification. But there's a little bit of something for everyone, as we cover a whole host of marketing topics. I chat to some amazing guests, each one a superstar in their own niche. And if you have a burning marketing question already, or after this episode, get in touch, we'll chat it through. peter@marketingstudylab.co.uk, or find me on LinkedIn, the link is in the show notes. If you'd like to leave a review on iTunes, this will really help others find this podcast and spread the marketing word. Now let's get on with today's episode. Of course, I'm going to start a review of the 4 C's of marketing communications by discussing consistency, which I'm hoping to achieve through this weekly podcast. Am I? Maybe. Let me know if I'm not, and I can look to change things around, or, if I am, just drop me a note to say, good job. You'll find me on LinkedIn, or email me at peter@marketingstudylab.co.uk. I'd be really keen to get your thoughts. Good or bad? Mainly good. Anyway, let's meet our guest this week, Louis Grenier, the owner of EveryoneHatesMarketers.com and content lead at Hotjar, an amazing piece of software for tracking website visitors. Check it out if you haven't. But today, we're more interested in why everyone hates marketers. It is easy to see why, as on the face of it, marketers are either seen as intrusive to our lives, fancy advertising, or playing around with social media. But this is on the outside, and as we all know, good marketing, quality marketing, a marketing-orientated approach is so much more than paying lip service to something. Louis spent a passionate obsession on marketing, and through his podcast highlights the shady, aggressive marketing world for what it is, while being an advocate for helpful, respectful, personal, and above all, honest marketing. Now, first of all, I have to apologise for this first question, as it is the epitome of stereotyping, as you'll understand when you hear Louis' amazing accent. So Louis, what is your favourite wine?
So I knew when you ask for a funny opener, you look at my nationality, okay, it's French, and you say, okay, what is the most French thing I can think about? And you thought about wine. So I thank you for that. Unfortunately, I'm not the best connoisseur of wine. I would say the more niche I can be would be like Bordeaux wine, red Bordeaux wine. I like the strong taste that it has. I like to drink it with some red meat, and that's the basic answer. I don't know deeper than this, unfortunately, for me and for you.
Would you prefer red or white wine, though?
Yeah, red. White is, especially in Ireland, where I'm based, is you wouldn't say it's the best type of wine that they're selling here. So red is probably my go-to.
Sure, I'm with you on that. Just white wine, to me, it just tastes too much like vinegar. I can't deal with it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to something more marketing then. What is the story that's brought you to this stage of your career? How do I describe this? As a marketer fighting against bullshit.
Yeah, I think that's the way to describe it, right? So I discovered marketing when I was 17 or 18. I went to Paris to visit my big brother, and he had this book that he has been gifting to more than 100 people, he said, at this stage. Like, I talked to him recently, and he said, I gave this very book to so many people you wouldn't believe, but it had a massive impact on me. And the French version of the book Persuasion by Cialdini, about the principle of persuasion, right? Everyone talks about it. Yeah. So it wasn't a translation of it. It was kind of a French as a behavioral psychologist who has his own take on it. And I got struck by how you can change people's behavior, or at least understand people just by using first principles and principles behind like just simple behavior stuff, such as, the foot in the door principle, where if you have something small to someone and then you have something bigger, they're more likely to say yes to the bigger thing. I mean, plenty of shit like this. And that fascinated me from the moment I read about it, because I think personally speaking, when I was a student, when I was lost in high school, didn't know really what I wanted to do, this was the thing I was really into, trying to understand other people. So I didn't go into marketing, though. I didn't study marketing. I studied mechanical engineering for a while, but it wasn't really my thing. I studied in the US for a year, doing an exchange program in the engineering school, and I had a few friends who were studying marketing actually then, and I used to read their courses and their class, and I was like so jealous of them. I really wanted to do that as well. So I helped this hookah parlor on their marketing while I was there, like, this shisha, the smoking.
Okay, sure.
So I helped them with marketing just on the side like this, and I don't know why they said yes, because I had no clue what I was doing. And this is when I started to realize, okay, I need to do this. So then I studied 1 year of business back in my hometown, I did a bit of marketing, and I joined then a company in Ireland doing nothing but marketing. Finally studied digital marketing, did a quick diploma in digital marketing in Dublin to get it in my CV, and in the meantime read a lot of books about it. So I had a lot of insights in my head, but I never applied it. So I had no really clue what I was doing. And finally I got hired in a startup to do marketing for the first time a few years ago at this stage. So why then this fight against marketing bullshit? Why do I have a podcast called Everyone Hates Marketer? That comes from the moment where I realized that I really didn't connect with the way marketing was being taught that much, and I really didn't connect with the way it was being executed in the company I was, or the way it was being talked to. To me, marketing was always about focusing and understanding people first, and then everything starts from there. While what I noticed from working in companies was it was always connected to the business. What do they want to do? And then let's try to squeeze money out of the customers. So there was a lot of practices that we did, like such as trying to hack Google at the time. At the time, you could do that. How do we spam people on Twitter using this Autobot software? Like, there's a shit ton of stuff that I'm very not proud of, that I hated doing or hated being part of. And that's when I started to realize I had a point of view that was a bit different, or at least I was saying stuff that people didn't necessarily talk about. And then it took me years and years to actually understand that that was my calling, in a sense, or the thing that I really, really, really love talking about. So it took me years to put that into a simple word, or a simple tagline, a simple concept. And the name of the podcast came from actually a Slack channel that I was part of, where I just asked, listen, I interviewed a few marketers, here's the vision about it, here's the concept of the podcast, I don't have a title for it. So I just asked around, and someone came up with this great title. So that's kind of the summary of the story.
That's a perfect summary, and it leads me very nicely on to the next question. And you alluded to the fact near the end of your story that you have your own podcast and your own website called everyonehatesmarketers.com. Can you just explain in a little bit more detail what that's all about?
Yeah, it's all about fighting aggressive, shady marketing. More importantly, it's all about helping people to focus on what is important in marketing, which is customers, and stop focusing on anything else. So I'm really, the more I've interviewed marketers, it's been, I think I've recorded my 125th interviews recently.
Nice one.
The more I'm talking to people, the more my point of view evolves as well, and the more I understand what this podcast is really about. And more than just fighting the bullshit, it's really about the marketing foundations. It's also about understanding that without those marketing foundations, you can't really do anything else. So it's not about the new Google AdWords feature update. It's not about following every single new update on Facebook. It's not about following what your competitors are doing. That's not what marketing is, what true marketing is. Marketing foundations start with understanding your customers so well that you know what they want, and therefore you can give that to them. And so that's what the podcast is about.
Excellent. I'll put a link in the show notes to the podcast. Obviously, after everybody's listened to this one, then they can go and jump on your podcast, and please do, because it is a really quality podcast. Which leads me very nicely onto something you mentioned briefly, and something you always tackle, and I think it's even in your intro or your outro to your podcast, and that is shady, aggressive marketing tactics that are are giving marketers a bad name, and like you said, you've been part of some of them, and not, you didn't enjoy that part of it. So what are some of these shady, aggressive marketing tactics?
So if you go on a website and you see this pop-up appearing in your face before you actually discover the content, and then it forces you in this kind of guilt trip about, okay, if you give us your email address, you're the best in the world. If you don't, then you're kind of a coward in a sense. You know, you have this, yes, I want to learn how to growth hack my website, and then no, I don't want to learn how to growth hack my website, and I don't want to make any extra money. So those type of pop-up that like really use the wrong psychological levers, I hate, and I know many people hate. And what you hear from the other side, people using them, they say, you know, traditionally they say, oh, but it gets more conversions, so that's why it's working, so therefore I'm using them. But the question to ask is it really working? Is it working in terms of new email addresses you get? But is that actually creating new customers for you or new good leads? And what usually happens in this situation is you force people to sign up. They are somewhat interested in what you have to offer, but because you force them, because you make them guilty, they are not going to be as engaged as they could be, and they are not going to open your emails anymore. And the quality of your email list is going to be worse than if you had just nicely asked whether people wanted to go to the next step with you and give you their email address. So that's one example. In general, what I like to say is, you know, good marketing, and as the opposite, the shady, aggressive marketing tactics, are the things that you wouldn't be doing to your own mom or to your friends. Those are the things that you're ashamed of. And if you do something that answer the question, no, I would never do that to my family or to my colleagues, or I would be ashamed of it, then you shouldn't do it, even if you are under pressure from management, from corporate and whatnot. So another example would be just simply lying about your product just to make it look better. And usually, you know, this type of bad marketing happens when you're under pressure. So you're under pressure from corporate, from your targets to actually deliver leads. But it also comes from a place where you see other people doing it. You know, you see other companies doing it, and you feel you should be doing it. So that's not okay. So those are like small examples, but you know, you can only do good marketing if you have a good product. I think that's something that I strongly believe in. You can't polish a turd, as they say. So if you have a shitty product and you expect marketing to do wonders, it's not going to happen.
It's so cyclical that if you haven't got a good product and you've got good marketing, it's not going to happen for you, because people will understand once they've purchased it that it's not a good product. And then if your product's quality and your marketing's quite shady, etc., then people aren't going to buy the product because they're not engaged with you. It's just it's so obvious. It leads me nicely onto my next question, and you alluded to it just then, that as marketers, we can be under pressure to provide short-term results, and we end up utilizing these tactics that don't build relationships, usually in the corporate environment rather than on an entrepreneurial ship or a sole trader one-to-one kind of thing if you're on your own business. But how do we convince those that want those short-term results that isn't the way forward?
So I think one of the best ways is not to tell them necessarily that what they're doing is wrong. I think they just have the wrong compass in a sense. They have objectives. They want to reach sales and targets, which everyone does in the marketing world. So that's perfectly fine. It's about telling them that they can reach those objectives without using those shady tactics. And those tactics that are much more oriented towards the customer work better. So the way I'm trying to tackle this is simply by interviewing people who are way smarter than me, who are way more successful than me, and who are all telling the same thing without a script. I mean, I'm selecting people just based on almost randomly sometimes, based on, you know, I've listened to them somewhere, I like them, I just interview them, and every time it goes back to the same thing. You know, the single theme that comes back from those good marketers, people who are successful and who can really do good around them, is like focus on your customer, and the rest will follow. So that's how you convince people. I think you need to show them that others succeed without using shady tactics. You know, you can think of, I'm just taking the biggest example I can because he's well known, but Seth Godin is a guy who's not using any shady tactics, even no gray hat tactics. He's just doing marketing the way I like to see it, and he's not pushing anyone into a guilt trip about like subscribing to his email address. He's not pushing anything, yet he's extremely successful because he's using, you know, the long-term thinking of, I want to build strong relationship with people. I want to help them out. I want to be trusted. I want to build foundation first. So people who have been here for the long term, you can bet that they focus on those foundations and in this good marketing.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Seth Godin, because he's just the perfect example at that pinnacle of pushing and promoting the fact that it is about building relationships and not using these shady tactics. And I'm also glad you mentioned getting people that know more about marketing than you do, or are more intelligent, so to speak, than you are on your podcast, because that's exactly what I do, and that's exactly why you're here, and that's me blowing smoke up your ass, by the way.
Thanks.
But speaking of the great successful marketers you've had on your podcast, is there one thing that sets them apart from the rest, or is everybody different?
I don't know if it's the concept of the show that make them all have the same underlying story. I don't know if it's the way I select people, that I'm just naturally geared towards those people. But when I challenge them, when I ask them tough questions, it always comes back to the source. They all say something like, the first step in your strategy is to start with your customer, to interview them, to survey them, to understand them. It always comes back to the same thing. So the theme is always the same, and then the way to do it is different. Marketing foundations could be, storytelling, customer research, behavioral psychology, but all of that, if you see a diagram, you can visualize at the center, you have your customer, and then everything points on outwards. So storytelling is based on customer, because that's what we've been doing as humans for millennials, telling stories and like around a fire, telling stories in houses. We connect to stories because that's how we've been entertaining each other. Convincing people, like such as those email lists that you've been added to. The reason why it works and it will always work is because you use the foot in the door principle, where you ask them for something small like their email address, and then you start building commitment slowly and surely. Just everything goes back to the consumer and whatever angle you try to talk about. So I have people who are like behavioral psychologists. I have people who would be storyteller. I have like PR. I have direct marketing. I have any type, and they all come back to the same thing. When you squeeze them enough, they all agree on the same thing. So I'm trying a bit more now to interview people who are not necessarily in this frame of mind, to really see what they got. But I've yet to find someone who disagree with the statement that it always starts with the customer. So yeah, I'm gonna try to find some more people who actively disagree with my point of view, but it's actually tough to find.
I can imagine, and I'll be certainly listening to that when you do find them, because it'll be amazing to see how they try and get out of that hole.
Yeah.
Looking at the present and the future, as a marketer, what should we be looking into and implementing right now?
So if you're listening to this, you might be prepping for an exam, or you already have qualified, you're a marketer. The main thing that I've never heard in business school when I was there, the main thing I've never read in marketing business books is what I've already mentioned. Like, marketing is not that different compared to 40 years ago. And people who say that are complete bullshitters. So they are telling you this because they want to sell their new product. They are telling you this because they want to sell their new book and the new software. The truth is, people haven't changed, right? That's part of our DNA. Millions of years of evolution has led to human beings. Don't expect technology to have changed the way we are shaped or the way we think. So that's one thing. Second, because of that, and because marketing starts with the customer, therefore it starts with the same foundations than it could have started 200 years ago, or even 2 millennials ago. So therefore, the tactics you're employing, the things you're doing day to day, are based on timeless foundations that will never change. So don't believe the hype around this new social media channel is the place to be. Don't believe the hype that this new feature from Google AdWords must be used or else you're going to lose business. Focus on the true north, which is always your customer. Interview them, understand who they are, understand where they hang out, understand who influenced them, understand why they bought from you, understand why they haven't bought from a competitor, understand who they look up to. Those core questions, what triggered them to buy from you, all of those core questions, and I can guarantee that the rest will follow. Then you'll know what channels to focus on. Then you'll know what to write. Then you'll know why you should advertise this product and not this one. It just, everything falls back to that. So I wish someone had told me that years ago when I was starting to study it, because it can be very overwhelming. And in fact, I do receive emails very regularly of people saying that I am overwhelmed by marketing. I don't know where to start. And that's our fault as marketers, because we just hype shit up. We just make people believe that we are so good at being marketers that we market to ourselves and just create this massive fear of missing out to everyone else. So again, go back to the first principles of marketing. Read the books that have been written 40 or 50 years ago about direct marketing that are still very relevant today. Read the books about behavioral psychology. I know you have a few questions around books. Read the books that are based on timeless foundations. As I said, storytelling, psychology, user research, and all of that. And I can guarantee that you will be a much better marketer than anyone who's trying to say that growth hacking is the way to go, for example.
I agree. And just on that point, what I'm currently and constantly trying to tell people and highlight is the fact that what you see in terms of marketing, what is out there, is the comms element, and that is what we focus on. And it's so easy for people coming into marketing or people that aren't within that department or that arena to really focus on that comms element first and foremost, rather than looking at, like you put it, the foundations. That is the tip of the iceberg. That's the bit, the cherry on the cake. We need to build the cake first. We need to understand that mix before we get to that part.
Yeah, there's a great book by Alan Deeb called The One-Page Marketing Plan, and he has an excellent definition of the difference between marketing, advertising, and all of that. So I need to find it, and I'm going to find it now, because it's just brilliant, and I think it's clarified a few things in my mind as well between what's the difference between PR, marketing, advertising, and all of that. So here is the simplest, most jargon-free definition of marketing you've ever likely to come across. That's from my friend Alan Deeb, who's the author of the One-Page Marketing Plan. If the circus is coming to town and you paint a sign saying "Circus coming to Showground Saturday," that's advertising. If you put the sign on the back of an elephant and walk into town, that's promotion. If the elephant walks through the mayor's flower bed and the local newspaper writes a story about it, that's publicity. And if you get the mayor to laugh about it, that's PR. Now, if the town citizens go to the circus, you show them the many entertainment booths, explain how much fun they'll have spending money at the booth, answer their questions, and ultimately they spend a lot at the circus, that's sales. And if you plan the whole thing, that's marketing.
I love it. If we had a round of applause button, I'd be pressing it right now. That's superb. I think you've mentioned a couple of them, if not a lot of them. But if somebody was just starting out in marketing, what advice would you give them so they don't fall down this bullshit rabbit hole and never see the light of day?
So let me give you a very, very practical example.
Okay.
So I've talked about understanding customer and all that. I know that could sound a bit cliche, a bit fluffy. So if you are not working for a company just yet, and if you're studying right now, or if you are working for a company just yet, you can do that. So if you want to apply to a job, let's consider that the company you want to work for is a potential is the company you want to sell to, right? Let's say that. So just as an example, that's your segment, that's the people you want to go to. If you work in marketing already, your company is obviously the one we're going to focus on. So interview 5 recent customers. So you send an email or you send them a letter, I don't really know, you send them a fax, you send them a pigeon, whatever. You just get in touch with them and you say, hey, I'd love to learn more about you and your area of expertise or whatever it is. If it's in B2B, you can say that. If in B2C, you can say, I'd love to hear more about your experience with the product. I'm not trying to sell you anything at all. It's not a sales pitch whatsoever. I just want to learn from you how you're using it. Super interested in that. If you're afraid of rejection, marketing might not be the field for you. You're going to get rejected every day. So expect a rejection of 80%, maybe 20% of people will end up on a call with you. That's normal. So if you want to have 5 people, you just interview, what is that? 100? No, I'm shit at math. 40. Wow, that was rough. So anyway, more people.
Yeah.
And then you get on the phone and you ask them a few questions. But what you want to understand really is what happened in their life from the moment when they first thought about perhaps buying a product like yours to the point where they are today after using the product. And you visualize this sort of timeline in your mind, right? Your goal as someone who's just having a normal conversation with them is to understand how they went through all of those checkpoints, in a sense. So you basically ask them this very question. Talk me through the very first time you've ever thought about potentially buying a product like ours, right? Now, you don't want to just start with this question. Obviously, you need to do some small talk and ask some kind of a bullshit question just to let them go, like a normal conversation. And then just listen and ask why. So they might say, I was just talking to my daughter and we were in the park and she said, you know what, Daddy, I'd love for us to watch movies together. I don't know, I come up with shitty stuff right now, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So they talk about their personal experience. They use words that are super important because the way they talk through their experience is what matters for you as a marketer. And the triggers that you want to hit, the things that you really want that matters as a checkpoint is, okay, what other competitors have they looked at? How did they research the product? Who did they talk to understand whether that was the right decision? What made them buy it, like on the day? Like what was the final trigger that made them decide? What, if anything, has almost stopped them from buying this product? What other products have they looked at? What did they think of the price? What would they say to a friend if they had to recommend this product to someone? I mean, you basically go through the full timeline and you get it transcribed. So depending on the country you're in, if you're in the US, you need to ask for consent, obviously. I mean, in every country, basically, it's nice to say, I'm going to record this conversation. Are you okay with that? Record this conversation and then get it transcribed. There are services like rev.com that enable you to transcribe anything in less than 24 hours. And then read through that. And this is basically the core of your foundation, the core foundations of your marketing. It's really the way people talk about you, the way they consider you, the trigger that made them buy, the reason why they bought from you. I mean, you can use that for everything. So once you have that, then you have their foundations. And once you have your foundation, then you can use a book like the One-Page Marketing Plan to set up a basic strategy about who are my customers, who are the best customers that I have. Where do they hang out? Who are they influenced by? What channel are they using? And then, building the campaign, building the journey from the time you want to track them to converting them to delighting them. But again, you see, it starts with customers. It starts with actual interviews. And the reason why I'm pushing for that a lot is because you could potentially get some of the data from, let's say, Google Analytics or surveys. But talking to people face to face or over the phone, like we are doing right now, looking at each other's eyes and body language, understanding and hearing it firsthand, how people think about your product, how they describe it, is going to change you as a marketer because you're going to remember that for a long, long time. And that's going to really help you to empathize with them and who they are, instead of just a persona bullshit template that you can find on HubSpot that doesn't tell you anything about who they are or why they buy from you. So that's why I would say, like, this is, if there's one thing to remember from this conversation, this is it. Interview 5 customers. You'll learn a ton from them.
I love that. That is absolutely superb. Great advice. Are you ready for some quick-fire questions, Louis?
Let's do this.
Name one must-read business book.
So Brainfluence, I think, is the 100 behavioral psychology principle to influence and persuade people.
What was the last thing you Googled?
I think I Googled Marketing Study Lab.
Love it. Everybody should Google that. What is your most used app at the moment?
It's Audible. I listen to audiobooks quite a lot on this, but I also listen to podcasts now. I'm really into true crimes.
Okay.
And there's a great podcast around. I mean, it's taking a downturn really quickly. There was a murder in West Cork, Ireland, 20 years ago that hasn't been solved since then, and this podcast called West Cork is fantastic.
Brilliant. I'm going to bring it up a little bit more now. It sounds interesting. Have you ever seen Business Wars?
No.
That's a really good podcast. So it just basically pits two businesses like Pepsi, Coca-Cola, that kind of thing, and tells you the history behind it. Really interesting. Nice. Well, yeah, more of a happier tone. But no, that sounds really cool. What would be your one tip for people who are studying at the moment?
Again, going back to the thing about focusing on customer. But beyond that, really, I mean, marketing, as you said, it's not communication, it's not advertising, it's much bigger than that. So if you get thrown away by advertising that you see in the streets and stuff, that's not necessarily what marketing is. But the last thing I would say really is your life is not measured by the scores you get in your exam or by the job you get. It's touched by the number of lives you touch. And that's super important when you think of marketing because, it's so accelerating to know that what you're saying or your work you're producing have an impact on other people's life. And that's the best thing about this podcast. It's the best thing about the conversation we have is that you can have an impact on others. So don't think that it's because you don't have good grades necessarily or that you don't have experience as much as other people do, that you can't have such an impact. If you think about life this way, you're going to be a great marketer.
Yeah, I completely agree. Although I'm a tutor and I advocate qualifications, it's like it's just a foundation, and it's what you build on that actually counts once you've got that qualification and you move on. So, final question: what is the biggest load of bullshit you've ever heard?
That marketing doesn't work. You just need a good product. I think that sucks. Because any good product uses marketing principle to build it, right? Any good product is built upon the understanding that, you do market research to understand how the product could be improved. You do market research to understand how to market this product. The thing about good marketing is that it's seamless and it's invisible. You don't see it, right? You think, oh, it's such a good product. You talk about it to your friend. That's good marketing. You just don't realize you've been marketed to. But those are the good marketers. You only notice shitty marketing.
Love it, Louis. That's a great way to end. But final point. If people want to hear more about you or Everyone Hates Marketers, where should they go and what should they do?
You just Google Everyone Hates Marketers. You'll find the site. If you listen to podcasts, you search for it in your podcast app, and you'll find it. There's like a lot of episodes that are quite long, so just pick the ones that you prefer for first. I would say maybe start with Seth Godin interview, maybe Mark Ritson after that, and maybe Joanna Weeb after that. Those are the top 3 I think I recommend to people.
Louis, it's been absolutely fantastic, and thank you so much for coming on today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much for doing what you're doing. It takes some guts, it takes time to do this, so thank you, and I hope people listening to your podcast enjoy it as well.
Louis, can't thank you enough for joining us. So fascinating. But what are my top takeaways from that little conversation? My first one is that you need to focus on understanding your audience. That's the very first thing you need to do, and then go from there. Everything stems from understanding your target market, what they want and why. If you don't do this, try asking yourself, where should I start? I'm pretty sure you won't be left with many, if any, other options. And this leads nicely onto where to start on your road to success, which would be interviewing 5 customers, digging deep into their actual customer journey from the moment they realised they had a problem to the point of purchase, and work it from there. From this, you'll be able to discover a lot more about your customers than just what they purchased. You'll be digging into the why, and that is gold dust. And finally, if you want to avoid shady and aggressive marketing tactics, simply do as Louis says. If you wouldn't do it to your friends, then don't do it. And finally, our top tip for the week, and we start to look at the 4 C's of marketing communication with consistency. Think of a brand or a company or a product or a service. Got it? Okay. These may change over time, what they offer, the personnel, location, logo, etc. But one thing is for sure. Whatever you are thinking of, be it a company, a product, a service, a brand, a logo, whatever it is you're thinking of, it will have resonated with you for their consistent approach. And by maintaining this consistency, they have become memorable to you. A consistent message will eventually break through the myriad of communication noise we have around us, becoming more noticeable, memorable, with a recollection for what they offer becoming easier over time in your own mind. The whistle at the end of a fast food chain's advert, the chime made when a computer processor is mentioned, and of course, meerkats. All of these, although I haven't mentioned any company names there, are instantly recognisable because of their consistent and, sometimes annoying approach to communications. Thank you so much for joining us today on Marketing Study Lab. It really means the world that you're listening to this out there. And hopefully I've provided you some value. If you're looking to know more about what Marketing Study Lab does and is about, go to marketingstudylab.co.uk or get in touch with me personally. LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. or feel free to email me at peter@marketingstudylab.co.uk. Happy marketing.